My name is Margaret, and before I tell you what happened to my son, I need you to understand who he was, because people like to turn lives into headlines, and my boy was never a headline. He was a person who laughed at bird feeders and clapped for sunsets and said the wrong words in the most beautiful way. He was born with Down syndrome, and I was told to expect limits, but what I learned over 38 years is that love expands every so-called limit until it doesn't look like a wall at all, more like a gate you just didn't know how to open. He loved routine. He loved his house slippers. He loved the calendar on the fridge where he circled Fridays because I always brought apple fritters on Fridays, and he loved his apartment because it was the first thing in his life that the world couldn't take away with a policy change or a budget cut or a shrug. I helped him get that place through a supported housing program. I signed 1,000 forms and sat in 10,000 waiting rooms. When we finally found it, a small one-bedroom in a quiet building with a maple tree that turned the window gold in October, he walked in and said, "My home," and then like he just discovered a magic trick, he whispered, "My home." Again, softer, like he was tasting the words. That was the day I understood dignity is not philosophy, it's a key on a ring. For years he did well. He had a part-time job bagging groceries, where the manager called him chief, and meant it kindly. He went to church with me on Sundays and high-fived the ushers. He FaceTimed his cousins to show them his Lego cars. He kept a scrapbook of ticket stubs, the zoo, the movies, a minor league baseball game where he ate a hot dog with mustard and said it tasted like fireworks. He was safe and he was loved. And when I got older, arthritis in my hands, the kind that makes zippers feel like locks, I did what so many of us do. I let myself believe the world would keep being what it had been. The first time I met Lorraine, she had a practiced softness, the kind that sits on the face like a scarf you put on for company. She said she was a widow with 3 kids, said she believed God put people in our path for a reason, said she had experience caregiving, said she could help him with meals and laundry and rides to the doctor in exchange for staying in the spare room off the kitchen. Only there was no spare room off the kitchen, just a little dining nook where he kept his puzzles. And I said so, but she smiled like problems made her stronger and said, "We'll make it work." I would give anything to go back to that conversation and be a different version of myself, harder, colder, the kind of woman who distrusts nice smiles. I wasn't that woman. I was a tired mother who wanted relief without admitting it. My son liked Lorraine's children at first. He liked children the way some people like fresh air. They colored with him at the table. He showed them how to stack puzzle pieces by color. They called him Mr. M. He beamed. Lorraine cooked, I will give her that. The first week there was chili in the crock pot and cornbread on a tray, and she texted me photos with captions like movie night. And I let myself breathe. I let myself sit in my recliner and watch the local news without my chest tightening. And then a week became a month, and her boyfriend moved in with a rolled-up mattress like a flag of announcement. And I said, "Wait," and she said, "It's only temporary." And all the while she was moving the furniture inch by inch as if she were redrawing a map. My son's puzzles into a box that ended up in the hall closet, his calendar replaced by a chalkboard with notes I couldn't recognize, his slippers in a bin to keep things tidy. She told me not to worry about the mail, that she'd sort it. And when I said the rent statements come in paper, she said she'd handle it. I told myself to be grateful, because gratefulness is the only language mothers like me are allowed to speak. If we say we are tired, they call us saints, which is another word for not taken seriously. The neighbors began telling me small things in small voices. He looked confused at the bus stop, one said. He seemed thinner, another said. I'd knock and Lorraine would open the door with a baby on her hip, laughing as if joy were proof of innocence. And she'd say he was napping, he'd had a big day. Do I want to see the chore chart she made for him? Wasn't it wonderful how responsibility builds self-esteem? My son began calling me fewer times. When he did, he kept repeating, "Busy, Mom, busy," like an apology someone drilled into him. When we went to Sunday service, Lorraine started coming along, making sure he sat between her and the aisle. She answered for him when people asked questions. "He's adjusting," she'd say. "We're a family now. Family is a blessed word and a dangerous one. The first lie a predator tells is often the most polite. I remember the Saturday I found him standing outside his own building in a coat that wasn't his, too large, frayed at the cuffs, and he had a plastic cup of coins. He looked embarrassed, said helping, and then quick, like a reflex that hurt him, said, "Lorraine says for rent." I took him to the diner and bought us pancakes, and he ate like he was hungry in a way I didn't recognize, not appetite but relief. And I called Lorraine from the booth with my fingers shaking so hard it hit the wrong contact twice. She said I was overreacting, that he liked feeling useful, that people give better when they see a face. I told her he was not a donation box, he was a person. There was a silence, a kind you meet like a wall, and then she said in a voice that had lost all lace, "If you want him to keep his home, we all have to pitch in." I didn't sleep that night. I drove back at 6 a.m. with bags of groceries and knocked until her boyfriend opened the door with a smile he didn't own. He said Lorraine and the kids were sleeping. My son shuffled in wearing socks on a cold floor, and I wanted to ask 100 questions at once. "Are you eating? Are you scared? Are you okay?" He hugged me and said, "I miss puzzles." That was the moment I knew something simple and terrible. When someone intends harm, the first thing they take is not money or property. It's the small rituals that make you yourself. I tried to pull him out. I called Adult Protective Services. I filed a report. I begged the housing coordinator to review the caregiving arrangement. Each call turned into a list of steps, each step into a wait time, each wait time into another justification Lorraine offered to anyone who would listen, about how hard she worked, how grateful I should be, how I was struggling with letting go. She laughed and told people I was old-fashioned, as if decency were a superstition. I am telling you this because I need your help seeing what I failed to see fast enough and naming it out loud so it has no shadows left to hide in. If you're watching, please don't look away. Please don't tell yourself it's complicated, and therefore no one's fault. Predators pick complicated because it keeps decent people quiet. My boy's life was not complicated. He needed safety, respect, structure, food, sleep, and people who wouldn't turn him into a source of income. I need you to hear me say that he mattered, not as a symbol, not as a cautionary tale, but as a son who liked apple fritters and circled Fridays and clapped for sunsets. I need you to share this story because attention is the one thing abusers can't ration. They thrive in rooms where the only voices are theirs. If you are a landlord, a neighbor, a church member, a caseworker, a cashier who sees a man with a plastic cup and a coat that does not fit, please notice, ask names, learn routines, offer your number. Abusers hate witnesses. I am not asking you to be a hero. I am asking you to be noisy. When you hear the word caregiver, don't stop your questions. When someone says we're family now, ask what that means on a Tuesday when the fridge is empty and the rent is due. When a mother like me says something feels wrong, don't hand her a brochure. Hand her a chair at the table where decisions are made. I will tell you the rest, but for now, this is my first ask. Share my boy's name and the truth that he had one. Call what happened to him by its real words. And if you live in a city like ours, where kindness is always in season and exploitation is too, then let's make sure kindness learns to lock its doors. When I left you at the end of my first telling, I hoped you could already feel the way the ground started to shift beneath my son's life, the way the small cracks became gaping holes. If the first part of his story was about how trust was twisted, then this part is about the slow breaking of a man who deserves safety and dignity. I need you to stay with me, because these words are hard to say, but harder to keep buried, and maybe if I speak them plainly enough, someone else's child will be spared. Lorraine didn't storm in like a thief in the night. No, her cruelty was patient, layered, disguised. That's what makes it so hard for people like me, mothers who want to believe in second chances and the possibility that strangers can be kind. At first it was little things. She accidentally donated his favorite shirts to Goodwill because they were too childish. She cut his hair too short, saying it was easier to manage. She switched his doctor's appointments without telling me, because it's less stressful that way. Each change on its own might have seemed harmless, even thoughtful. But the sum was theft, She was stripping him piece by piece of his identity until he was less my son and more her project. I began to hear rumors from the neighbors, quiet words shared at mailboxes and grocery aisles. I saw him out front with a sign asking for money. He looked like he hadn't eaten. He seemed scared when I waved, my heart clenched with every whisper, but when I confronted Lorraine, she turned it around. "He wants to help out," she said with a tone that suggested I was stifling his independence. "You've babied him for too long. I'm teaching him responsibility." And oh, how slick those words sounded. Responsibility, independence. The very concepts every mother of a child with disabilities hopes to see bloom. She weaponized our hopes against us. Then there was the day I saw him at the corner of Main Street, cup in his hands, wearing shoes too worn for his gait. He froze when he saw me, like a deer caught between love and fear. He muttered, "Helping, Mom, helping," as though it were a script Lorraine had drilled into him. My knees nearly buckled on that sidewalk. I pulled him into the diner nearby, bought him pancakes and orange juice, and he devoured them with such hunger it nearly broke me in two. When I asked him if Lorraine knew he was there, he whispered, "She said for rent." I called every number I could think of that night: Adult Protective Services, the housing office, even the police. And do you know what I got? Case numbers, reference numbers, hold music. Every system told me to wait, to provide evidence, to trust the process. Meanwhile, Lorraine was parading herself as his savior, telling anyone who questioned her that she had taken on a burden no one else wanted. And people believed her because she looked tired and carried babies on her hips. Who would imagine that the tired widow was the abuser? The abuse escalated. I heard from one of the church women that he had bruises on his arms. Another neighbor said he saw Lorraine yelling at him on the porch, calling him stupid loud enough for the street to hear. A grocery clerk told me he often tried to sneak extra food into bags, and when Lorraine caught him, she would slap his hand and hiss. Every story was a pinprick, and together they became a wound I could not close. I tried to visit more often, but Lorraine always had an excuse. He was resting, he had an appointment, the kids were sick. When I insisted, she would bring him to the door, smiling like a hostess, while he stood silent, eyes down. Once I hugged him and whispered, "Are you okay?" And he said, "I miss puzzles." 4 words. That was the truth he managed to slip past her walls. I bought him a new puzzle, wrapped it in bright paper, but the next time I came, it was gone. Lorraine said, "He got frustrated, so I threw it away." She laughed like it was trivial, like she had done him a favor. But I knew better. She wasn't removing frustration. She was erasing joy. The breaking point for me was the hospital call. He had been admitted for dehydration and exhaustion. The doctor said he seemed malnourished, and I stared at him on that hospital bed, skin pale, lips cracked, the sparkle in his eyes dulled. Lorraine stood beside me, crocodile tears streaming, telling the staff how difficult it was to care for him, how hard she was trying. She played the victim, and once again, people believed her. That night, I sat by his bed and held his hand. He whispered, "Home, Mom?" And I promised him he would come home. But I lied, not because I wanted to, but because Lorraine had already planted herself like a parasite in the soil of his life, and no matter how I pulled, the roots were deeper than I imagined. After that hospitalization, he never truly recovered. The light in him flickered, dimmer each week. He grew thinner, quieter, more withdrawn. By the time I realized he was slipping, it was too late. Lorraine had taken not just his home, but his will. And when death finally came, it came not as a storm, but as a silence. I need you to hear me now. My son did not die of natural causes in the way people like to frame it. He died of cruelty. He died of neglect disguised as caregiving. He died because the systems meant to protect him failed, and because a woman named Lorraine saw vulnerability as an opportunity. I am telling you this not just to grieve, but to plead. If you are listening, if you are watching, do not look away when you see the signs. Do not assume that paperwork equals protection. Do not mistake exhaustion for sacrifice or smiles for sincerity. Abusers thrive on our willingness to give them the benefit of the doubt. This is my plea. If you ever see someone like my son, someone who claps for sunsets, who circles Fridays on a calendar, who treasures puzzles and apple fritters, please, please don't let their story end like his. Raise your voice, report louder, ask harder questions, and most of all, don't wait. Waiting is the weapon that killed my boy. And Lorraine, her shadow did not stop with his last breath. She still lurks, still demands, still claims the right to the very apartment where she broke him. That is where the fight continues, and that is where I need your help most. But that, my dear listener, is for the next part of this story. I promised you I would tell the rest, and now we have arrived at the part I dread the most. Because speaking of death is one thing, but speaking of what comes after is another kind of torment. Grief, you see, is heavy but honest. It lies in your chest, crushing, yes, but straightforward in its cruelty. What came after my son's passing was not grief alone, but insult stacked upon grief, a twisting of memory and a theft of dignity that made my mourning into a battlefield. When my son passed, I wanted to believe the world would stop for a moment, that people would bow their heads, that silence would honor him. Instead, Lorraine stepped forward as though she had earned the right to dictate his legacy. She claimed the apartment was hers now, that she had been his caregiver, his partner in life, his family. Family. She used that word again like a hammer, and I wanted to scream because family is not the woman who starves you, mocks you, drives you into the ground. Family is the mother who circled Fridays with apple fritters, the cousins who cheered his Lego cars, the neighbors who loved his wave. But predators know how to twist words until they no longer mean what they should. She filed papers. Can you imagine? She filed legal papers to take his apartment, to take the last thing in this world that bore his fingerprints. She sat in that office with her crocodile tears, telling officials how she had dedicated her life to him, how she had sacrificed for his care, how she deserved compensation. Compensation for cruelty, for theft, for the kind of neglect that sent him to an early grave. And once again, because she had babies on her hip and a weary look in her eyes, people tilted their heads and thought, poor woman, poor woman. Poor is the son I buried, not the woman who buried him in exhaustion before the soil ever touched him. His relatives and I, we pushed back. We gathered witnesses, neighbors who had seen her yell, clerks who had seen her slap his hand, parishioners who had seen her silence his answers. We collected every rumor, every whisper, every shard of evidence, and we stitched them into a tapestry of truth. But do you know how hard it is to make truth louder than performance? Lorraine knows how to play her role. She knows how to turn her hardships into shields, how to cry on cue, how to frame every act of cruelty as discipline or tough love. And the system, oh, the system, it wants neat boxes. Caregiver, dependent, widow, victim. These words are easier to file than predator in disguise. I sat in those hearings, hands trembling, voice breaking, and I begged them to see the truth. I begged them to look at the hospital records, the weight loss charts, the signs of neglect. I begged them to listen to my son's last words, I miss puzzles. Do you understand what that means? A man who once filled scrapbooks with joy, reduced to whispering the absence of a simple pastime. That was not a random loss. That was the theft of happiness by someone who wanted his home more than his life. And now, dear listener, I turn to you, because justice is not just won in courtrooms. Justice is won in the court of public eyes, in the conscience of communities, in the refusal of ordinary people to stay silent. Lorraine wants this story buried. She wants to be the grieving widow who tried her best. She wants to hold up her children as proof of her struggle and erase the man whose apartment she invaded. But I refuse to let her write the ending. My son may not have had a powerful voice, but he had me, and now he has you. So I am asking you, no, I am pleading with you, do not let this story fade. Share it, speak it. Remember him not as a nameless victim, but as the man who clapped for sunsets and circled Fridays. Stand with me in saying no to predators who cloak themselves in kindness. Stand with me in demanding that systems meant to protect the vulnerable actually do so. Stand with me in refusing to let Lorraine, or anyone like her, profit from cruelty. I do not know if the law will do what is right. I do not know if the apartment will remain safe from her hands. But I do know this: the more people who hear my son's story, the less space there is for Lorraine to twist the narrative. Abusers thrive in shadows. We must drag them into the light. If you take anything from my voice today, let it be this: kindness must be guarded, not blind. Help is holy, but help must have boundaries. Do not let your desire to relieve suffering become the doorway for wolves to enter. If you see someone vulnerable, help, yes, but help with eyes wide open, with questions asked, with checks and balances in place. Protect the innocent not just with your heart, but with your vigilance. My son deserved a life filled with puzzles, with apple fritters, with dignity. He deserved better than Lorraine. And though I could not save him in time, maybe, with your help, I can save the next one. So I beg you, take his story with you, repeat it, make it louder than her lies. Let his life not end in silence, but echo in your choices, in your watchfulness, in your refusal to let predators win. This is my cry for help. This is my plea for justice. And this, above all, is my promise: my boy will not be forgotten.